Welcome to Fresno State, and welcome to the Portuguese Beyond Borders Institute 4th Anniversary Lecture, hosted by our Fresno State President, Dr. Saul Jimenez. We thank the President and his wife, Dr. Mariana, and their extraordinary and most talented, I think all of you would agree with me, sons, and the President's entire staff, who have been fantastic to work with. Thanks to Yvette and the entire staff for all their hard work. Besides our flagship, the Portuguese Oral History Project, working on our second documentary in all the archive here at the Fresno State Library, our conference and lecture series, which by now has over 200 lectures and conferences in the last 4 years, and it is the only conference and lecture series in a U.S. academic institution that focuses on the Portuguese and in particular the Azorean diaspora experience. We're also proud of our partnerships with the Hub Project in the Linguistics Department to create a toolbox for teaching Portuguese through popular folk tales. Our Cagarro Colloquium, you have to say that word kind of carefully because it can mean also something else. Our Cagarro Colloquium, a community of writers with ties to the Azores. Our Eyes on Books, focusing on books that are being published by Portuguese immigrant writers in the US and Canada. Our Azorean Diaspora Project, our Madeira Diaspora Initiative, our recently created Azores Diaspora Media Alliance, and the new project focused on increasing the number of Portuguese language teachers at Central California high schools in collaboration with the Central Valley World Language Project, CLTA, and various other community volunteers. And of course, our Portuguese American Leadership Academy with the California Portuguese American Coalition. These are just some of the projects that we're very proud to put forth through PBBI at Fresno State, and most certainly including some new creations, a newsletter called Novidades, our Bruma Poetry Festival during the month of April, last year with 90 voices in 30 days. Our Bruma Publications, our first publishing book just came out. I want to thank Dr. Sergio Laporta for all of his help and assistance with that. And of course, many of the different projects that include agricultural and social science as well. We also are very excited to have later on in the month the signing ceremony between Fresno State with our president, Dr. Jimenez Sandoval, and of course our friends from FLAT, Dr. Michael Bond. PBBI works hard to fulfill its mission of supporting and delivering content that's accessible to academics and the community, to be the hub for cultural, literary, pedagogical, and research resources for the diverse Portuguese diaspora in the San Joaquin Valley and the entire state. We seek to be a congregating venue for cultural events, workshops, literary resources, artistic showcases, our legacy archives, various panels, most of them interdisciplinary and performing arts, not only for our students, faculty, and staff, but also for enriching the Portuguese American community at large. The PBBI works hard to build a strong working relationship with the Portuguese diaspora in California, the Lusophone world, allowing Fresno State students the opportunity to establish connections with other cultures and experiences and to expand career opportunities, not just locally, but globally. Again, thanks to all of you for your support. We want to celebrate the last 4 years looking into the future, so we must look at new and innovative ideas to bring our efforts together and build upon these initiatives. And of course, that includes all of our digital archives here in the library, and I want to thank an editor from the Azores who is here, who has already donated his collection to our library and the collection that we have at just outside here on the second floor, the Portuguese collection. And this friend of ours just recently, about an hour ago, we went through our special collections area, and he has over 20,000 images of the Portuguese diaspora in California, and he donated them to our special collections. We are very, very gracious for that generosity, and that is Mr. Lidwinho Borba from the island of Terceira, the Azores. Thank you, Lidwinho. Muito obrigado pela tua generosidade para com este projeto. I'm pleased to introduce our president of California State University, Fresno, who, as many of you know, is fluent in Portuguese, so I will translate exactly what I said in a little bit. But he's a strong supporter of PBBI, and not just PBBI, but all of our multicultural California experience, and certainly a champion in the continuing effort to empower our students, our valley, our community, and all ethnic communities that compose the rich human tapestry of this region. I met our president many years ago, as he knows. I tell the story, but I want to be very quick. And his professor at UC Irvine, who Dr. Debbie Avila also went to the same area, professor in the same college. Professor Ana Paula Ferreira called me for a symposium that we used to do in Tulare, and she said, and I quote, I always remember this, "O rapaz é brilhante." This guy is brilliant. Well, he still is brilliant. Dr. Saul Jimenez Sandoval.
Thank you, Denise, for that very kind introduction. And it's a true honor for me to introduce to you the Ambassador of Portugal today. We are grateful and honored to have Ambassador of Portugal to the United States, the esteemed Francisco Duarte Lopes, deliver this evening's lecture for all of us. Ambassador Lopes was born in Castelo Branco, a beautiful city in mainland Portugal. He holds a law degree from the Faculdade de Direito in Lisbon and a postgraduate degree in European Affairs from the Faculdade de Direito in Coimbra. He has been part of Portugal's diplomatic corps since 1989, holding several positions in various countries, diplomatic posts in the European Union, diplomatic advisor to the Prime Minister from 2009 to 2011, the Chief of Staff of the Secretary of State of European Affairs, the Director General for European Affairs, and Director General for Foreign Policy, or Political Director from 2014 to 2017. A lot of really impressive titles, which of course also convey his importance in Portugal and in the world as well. Before he was appointed the Ambassador of Portugal to the US, he was the permanent representative of Portugal to the United Nations in New York City. The Ambassador is married and has 2 children. We welcome the Ambassador to Fresno State, and the active Portuguese American community in the Central Valley gives you a warm welcome. This community has contributed immensely to the multicultural experience of our valley and our state, and is a foundational economic force of our valley as well. The Ambassador's remarks today are titled, Portugal and the US in a Changing World, and just because I can, I'm going to say it in Portuguese. As relações entre Portugal e os Estados Unidos da América no mundo em mudança. Please give Ambassador Duarte Lopes a warm welcome.
So, thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here. If you allow me, I will start with some words in Portuguese. Então, para começar, queria muito agradecer ao Presidente da Universidade, Professor Saúl Jimenez Sandoval, também ao Professor Dinis Borges e aos dois, congratular pelo 4º aniversário do Portuguese Beyond Borders Institute. Desejando aos dois e ao Instituto e a todas as suas atividades muitos mais anos de serviços distintos. Serviços distintos à Universidade de Fresno, à língua portuguesa, que liga várias centenas de milhões de pessoas em todo o mundo, como sabem, e às relações entre os Estados Unidos e Portugal. Portanto, muito obrigado. Thank you very much. I know that some of you understood. I was thanking the President and the Professor Dinis Borges for their work and for the work of the Institute over these 4 years. So, switching now to English, it's a real pleasure to be here again in this valley. In my only 7 months since I presented my credentials to President Joe Biden, it is the second time I am in San Joaquin Valley. The first time was in September with the President of the Portuguese Republic, Marcelo Rebelo de Sousa, in Custim and in Headwater. And I really hope to come back as soon as possible with our Consul General in San Francisco, Pedro Pinto, whom some of you know well and who could not come today with me because we had a member of government in San Francisco, and who told me until the end, I would have to be there with you. So I'm sure I will come back as soon as possible with Pedro Pinto. You all know better than I do that California, and this Central Valley in particular, play a special role in what concerns the Portuguese-American relations and the Portuguese-American friendship. Courageous Portuguese migrants came to California generations ago, bringing hard work ethics, ingenuity, and know-how as instrumental contributions into transforming a promise of a better life into a powerhouse of innovation, a beacon of scientific breakthroughs, and a worldwide model and a worldwide power. The children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren of those courageous Portuguese are today, as many other descendants of migrants, proud Americans. And they are proud Americans doing many things. Congressmen and women, businessmen and women, scholars, farmers, managers, whatever their dreams and their ancestors' vision drives them. As proud Americans as they are, they did not forget their Portuguese roots. They find reference in the same guiding principles of hard work, ingenuity, and know-how. And more young Americans are rediscovering Portuguese culture, the Portuguese language, and what Portugal has to offer today. Sometimes, and this happens more and more frequently, this curiosity comes from Americans that have no roots in Portugal. But it is often spearheaded and influenced by contacts with Portuguese Americans who have been our best marketing pictures, our best influencers, as we would say today, of the breathtaking views of the Açores, of the historic tales hidden behind castles and palaces in Sintra, in Guimarães, in Tomar, in Évora, and of the unique man-made sceneries of the Douro Valley or of the Madeira Mountains. The image of Portugal in the United States and the knowledge of Portugal in the United States is, in very good part, shaped from the image of the Portuguese and the Portuguese-American communities, spread around this very big and very fascinating country. A country with which Portugal has enjoyed almost 2.5 centuries of good relations, of shared interests, of economic complementarity, and mutual support in the wake of successive crises and very acute challenges. Our time is a time of excellence in the bilateral relations between Portugal and the United States, well-founded in a comprehensive set of common values, as well as in a reinforced transatlantic link. And if you look at the figures, you very quickly come to the conclusion that we are really going through a very good phase in our bilateral relations. Trade is going up, either to Portugal or from Portugal to the US, and it's going up at 2 digits every year. Investments are going up, again in both directions. American investment in Portugal and Portuguese investment in the US, and spreading more and more different sectors. The numbers of visitors, of tourists, are also going up. We are fast approaching a number of half a million Americans visiting Portugal every year, and most of them repeating, which says a lot that they liked the first visit. And then again, and on top of that, and including from California, we are seeing more and more Americans interested in settling down in Portugal, even only for part of the year. And we are also witnessing a growing American Portuguese living in Portugal. We are now approaching 10,000 Americans living in Portugal, and we know, and Professor Dinis Borges knows this also firsthand, because he happens to also be our honorary consul here in California. We are seeing the numbers of visas, requests for visas going up very quickly, not only from Americans who want to live in Portugal, but also from non-Americans living in the US that want to visit Portugal or to live in Portugal. So we are really witnessing a very interesting moment and a moment of, as I said, of excellence, of very good relation, very good bilateral relations. But there were other important moments before, and other moments when both our countries faced common challenges. Right at the beginning of the American journey, and a long time before this country became a continental power and then a world superpower, Portugal was the first neutral country to recognize the independence of the United States back in 1783. And this happened after France and the Netherlands recognized the independence of the colonies. But France and Netherlands were supporting the independence movement. So Portugal was the first neutral country to recognize. And for us, it was a very difficult step, because Portugal had and still has a very old alliance with England. And already by then, the relationship was not only political. Peter Francisco was a Portuguese, born in the Açores, and he was a trusted military aide to George Washington, by then the military leader of the colonies who wanted to become independent. There were already Portuguese traders in Philadelphia and in Virginia, including wine traders. And the founding fathers toasted with Madeira wine. That's why we will organize again this year an event called Toast to America around the 4th of July, giving sequence to a valuable initiative of my predecessor. And the event consists precisely of inviting people around a glass of Madeira wine to toast to the 4th of July, to the independence of the United States of America. Some decades on, when the United States was creating its space as a trade and maritime power and laying the ground for the world's most influential network of universities, and here I am in American University, and it's always a pleasure to visit American universities. And by then, and I'm speaking about 200 years ago, in the second decade of the 20th century, there was a Portuguese called José Francisco Correia da Serra, Abbé Correia da Serra. He left his mark in the Luso-American relationship. A renowned scientist, Correia da Serra, lived 8 years in the United States, including 4 years as head of the Portuguese diplomatic mission. So he was my distinguished predecessor. He was described by Thomas Jefferson as one of the most talented and knowledgeable men that he ever encountered. And Correia da Serra was a frequent visitor to Jefferson's house in Monticello and helped him in the creation of the University of Virginia. He was ambassador of Portugal to the US between 1816 and 1820. Then he went back to Portugal, and this year, precisely this year, we are commemorating the 200 years of Correia da Serra in Portugal as well as here in the United States. Fast forward 1 century to the beginning of the 20th century, and when the First World War happened, our armies, the armies of the two countries, fought on the same side. And then, in World War II, when Portugal facilitated the American use of military bases in the Açores, first in Santa Maria and then in Terceira, again, army men from both countries were on the same side, helping each other. And in these two occasions, in World War I, in Europe, in Flanders and in France, and then in World War II, in the Açores, when our air forces and our navies were working together, it happened that Portuguese, in the Portuguese army, were fighting or working side by side with descendants of Portuguese Americans who had migrated, especially from the Açores when they were working together in the base of Terceira Island in the Açores. NATO was created after the Second World War, as you know, in 1949, with the United States and Portugal as two of its founding members. Since the end of the Cold War, our troops and security forces have been together in many theaters of operations, be it for peacekeeping, for peace building, or for counter-terrorist missions in Bosnia, in Afghanistan, in Iraq, or again, also to ensure maritime security and fight piracy in the Gulf of Aden, in the East Africa, near Somalia, or in the Gulf of Guinea in West Africa, supporting the maritime strategy of the African Union. And now, as we all know, when war resurfaced in Eastern Europe, we are together, yet again. There's no other alternative than to be together. Not against any people, but supporting a country and the people that was invaded, supporting a country and the people that, like any other, want to be able to decide on their own destiny. This is a conflict with obvious global implications. If we accept the breaching and subversion of the most basic principles and rules of international law, the consequences of the precedent would reverberate in the European continent and beyond. Portugal has already received more than 50,000 Ukrainians since the war started a year ago. And we have continuously supported Ukraine in military and humanitarian terms. Our Prime Minister and our Foreign Minister both have visited Kiev, as President Biden just did very courageously this week. All of them showing in local solidarity. And we have shouldered our share of the European Union budgetary, humanitarian, and military support as a member state of the European Union. We are often tempted to view the difficulties of our times as the most challenging ones. But regardless of measurements, this is a crisis that we are fighting in our time. This is the crisis we are facing, and we have to live up to it, always bearing in mind that other big global challenges remain, like climate change, terrorism, health hazards, or inequality, and we cannot afford to ignore them. Thank you very much. Muito obrigado.
The ambassador will take any questions that you might have.
Don't make the ambassador's job easy. Yes, he's a diplomat. He's used to some hard questions.
You alluded to the investment that's been going on, the bilateral investment between the United States and Portugal, and vice versa. Do you have any insight of why Portugal paused the Golden Beset earlier this week, other than what we read on the press?
Yeah, I still have. I don't have deeper indications because this was, for the moment, it was only an indication from the government of its intentions. So the law is not yet produced or published. So we will only know after the law is decided upon and then published. So what we know are the intentions of the government. The government decided on a set of measures dedicated to facilitate the access to housing, especially of young people and the more destitute people, more in the big cities, I would say, because this is a big problem that has been felt, especially in bigger cities like Lisbon and Porto, also some other middle-sized cities, and of course less in the countryside. As it happens a little bit around the world, also here, but we keep on hearing these problems arising in most countries of the world. And among these measures decided by the government, there's one on the so-called golden visas. It's not the name of it's not its true name. The true name is.
It's known as.
Yes, but it's known as golden visas. Yes, the residence permit for investors. Sure. Yeah. And what I know for sure is that some of the other measures that we heard about, especially to facilitate renting of housing that is not permanently occupied, we will not apply to houses bought by migrants, and will not apply to second housing, even of Portuguese living in Portugal. So this is it's good that this becomes clear. On the so-called golden visas, we are still waiting for more indications. But what the Prime Minister said when he announced the measures was that the residents for investment had already performed basically, or their basic objectives. So I'm now waiting to know more in detail about how this measure is going to be applied in detail.
Thank you. So I have a question. Thank you again for coming to Fresno. But I kind of along the lines of the question previously asked. I was reading that in Portugal, especially like in Lisbon, a lot of many Brazilians are asking or soliciting their embassies
for help returning back to Brazil, mainly because it's difficult procuring work and housing. And I've heard that there's been a lot of complaints, kind of fairly or unfairly leveled at Americans who are kind of contributing to this increase. So with the, I guess, the pausing of the Golden Visa plan and what's happening, I guess, with Brazilians and maybe Americans as well, is this like a sign that Portugal in general is slowing down their pursuits of foreign investment, mainly from Brazil and the United States?
No, it's not. And you mentioned two very different questions. The first, so it's not a sign of decreased interest in investment. No, not at all. You mentioned two different questions. So the first one regarding the news on a number of Brazilians asking for support to be returned. The numbers are not more or less than the average number of migrants that has to be returned to their country of origin anywhere in the world. What happened is that the number of Brazilians settling down in Portugal went up so much that the numbers of people asking to be sent to their own country, the ones that, in short, the ones that change their minds, the numbers also grew. But the average is not more or less than any migrant flow to any country. To give you numbers, now we have around 500,000 Brazilians living in Portugal. If you count Brazilians that are only citizens of Brazil and Brazilians that are binational, who of course do not show very easily in the statistics. So I mean, with this number, it's normal that some people has to be returned, which is, by the way, the work of the international organizations for migration that operates around the world. Here in the US, of course, with many migrants that for one reason or the other has to be returned to their countries, but also in Europe and in Africa, for example. I mean, the flow of I remember this when I was working in New York. There are more flow of migration between African countries, from one African country to the other, than from African countries to Europe, and these ones are not in the news. But this is a general, it's happening generally when you have flows of migration. Some people, always a small number, very small number, has to be returned. Then, the second question, the impact of American people, British people, French people, Brazilians, Chinese people, Turkish people buying houses in Portugal, some of them using this so-called Golden Visa program. And yes, the reply is yes, in part. So, I have no scientific study to support what I'm going to say, but probably there was some effect of the application of this program in how easy it is to get affordable housing in the big cities. That's why the government decided 1.5 years ago to limit this program to the interior of the country, making an exception for the regions of Lisbon and Porto, precisely because of that, because there was an impact clearly on the bigger cities. So nowadays, until today, until this new law that we are still waiting to be published and detailed, until nowadays, it is only possible to ask for a golden visa if you are buying a house outside of the bigger cities. This being said, this is not the only cause of the difficulty of getting affordable housing. It's the market working normally, and this happens all around the world, even in countries that do not have this kind of program. And if it keeps on happening now, after the program was changed in order to be applicable only outside the bigger cities, it also shows that this was not the only cause or the most important one, for sure. That's why the set of measures announced by the government go much beyond the golden visas.
I can be Oprah if you want.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Ambassador. What would you think are the top challenges facing Portugal coming in this next decade of the 2020s through 2030?
Well, I normally say that I'm not in the game of forecasting, that I prefer to be in the game of preparing. Because, I mean, nobody knows, at least I don't know what will happen next year. I also don't know what will happen tomorrow. But, of course, we see some trends and we have to be prepared. One clear challenge, and here I am based on scientific studies, it's demographics. You are living in a country, the US, where the population has been steadily going up. In Portugal, for the last 25 years, I think I'm not exaggerating by much, the population has been going up just a little bit only because of migration, because of the migrants we are receiving. So the Portuguese, children of Portuguese living in Portugal are not enough to renew the population. And in our last census, last year, or 2021, but the results were known very recently, then it was clear that the population is now even decreasing. Not only maintaining or going up a little bit just because of migration, no, it's really decreasing. Even counting, of course, migrants. So, we have to prepare for that. We are already preparing for that. We are receiving migrants. I just mentioned Brazil because it's the biggest source of migration the last decades to Portugal. And of course, as we all know, it's always easier to adapt when you speak the same language. So it's not surprising to know that the biggest migrant community in Portugal are the Brazilians. And now, the government recently decided that migrants from Portuguese-speaking countries who are already in Portugal, but not yet, and most of them working in Portugal, but not yet formalized as residents, will have their permit, or provisional resident permit, as easily as the Ukrainian refugees. So it's kind of a fast track. Also in order to speed this process, because if you speak with Portuguese businessmen and women, they will tell you that they are starting to have some difficulties in hiring. Then, second challenge, very, very common to all of our societies, transition to more sustainable societies, and especially energy transition. On that area, I think we have been preparing well and preparing since long. Nowadays, because it was set as an objective, as a priority by several governments in Portugal, independently of the ideology, the bet on renewables, on renewable energy, and on sustainability in general. So this bet, these decisions, these successive priority decisions are giving results, clear results nowadays. We already have 60% of the production of our electricity, not the whole energy, but electricity coming from renewables. We overtook the European objectives for 2020. We are on our way to again overtake the objectives for 2025. We will quite easily, I think, go beyond 85% of renewables. So for 2020, we will be close to 100% of electricity produced from renewable energy. And when I say renewable, it's really renewable because we are not producing energy from nuclear. We are not. We got rid of coal already 3 years ago. Of course, we are still using oil and gas mainly for the rest of the energy, for non-electric energetic needs. And the big challenge until 2030 and beyond, because this will take more time, will be how to complete this transition. And then The third one, and I mean, we could speak about other challenges, but I will mention only 3 of them. It's of course the digital transition. Again, for a country like Portugal, I was going to say a small country, but as I spent 5 years in New York, alongside with representatives from the other 193 countries of the world, let me say, a medium-sized or small to medium-sized country. But for a small to medium-sized country, we cannot afford to change dramatically our policy orientations. So again, in this area, we have been betting government after government in accelerating our how to prepare for the digital transition. And nowadays, I'm glad to see that, for example, when I speak to American businessmen or when I speak to venture capitalists here in the US, they are more and more interested in the group of new enterprises, of startups that have been growing up in Portugal or from Portugal, and then some of them spreading to the US, by the way, in areas like tech, artificial intelligence, and several areas of engineering. So I think we are in the right direction, but again, we have to maintain these bets. This is very important. And bearing in mind that my country was not one of the most advanced countries in Europe or in the OECD regarding, for example, investment in research, in R&D, or even in percentage of educated people at college level. Only now we are reaching these averages, and this is the result of this bet. So we started from behind, and this bet produced results, and we have to keep on betting, to keep on innovating, because of course we are all facing this challenge of the digital transition.
This is just a quick follow-up to your energy statement you made regarding electricity. At 60%, soon perhaps to be at 80%. What is the average Portuguese citizen seeing in terms of his cost for that energy?
Yes, that's a very interesting point. When this bet started, say probably 25 already years ago, the reaction by the average citizen was mixed. I'm probably being too diplomatic. When people started to see the results in their electricity bills, they were not happy. Most of them. I think that if you speak to people now, especially after the war started, and we have seen the results in the cost of energy, including electricity, people now understand much better this policy investment and financing investment, of course, right at the beginning in renewables. Because a few weeks after the war started in Ukraine, it was very clear that Portugal and Spain also had this early bet in renewable energies, as in some other countries in Europe and around the world. But for Portugal and Spain, I speak also about Spain because we have now in Spain a common market of electricity, and we are now creating also a common market for gas. What happened was that the costs for Portuguese and Spanish consumers were lower and kept on being lower because we were not depending, as most of our partners in Central and Eastern Europe, from gas or from oil, but especially from gas to produce electricity.
One last question, if there is one.
Yes, you mentioned that there's an exchange of products between the United States and Portugal. And I'd like to know what are the top products that are exchanged, in both directions. And then what's the importance of California? I mean, we have a fairly large economy here. And also, education. Do you have any idea how many Portuguese citizens are studying in the United States and vice versa? How many Americans in Portugal?
I don't know the exact numbers starting from your last question, but I know that the numbers are growing. But just to give you an example, my first trip out of Washington, when I arrived in Washington 7.5 months ago, was to Indianapolis. It was not because of the Portuguese communities, because the Portuguese community is not that numerous there, but it was because of an economic event that was organized by the government of Indiana, and I was present there with an economic mission from our trade and investment agency. And because I was there, our honorary consul in Indianapolis organized a meeting with some Portuguese living in Indianapolis. And some of them are precisely teaching in universities. And I was incredibly surprised to know that there were 250 Portuguese studying only in Indiana, which also says a lot about your universities. The American universities are attracting people, know how to attract the most talented people, and I think this is one of the most incredible assets of this country, and it also applies to the Portuguese who want to study in the best universities. But we are also seeing more Americans interested in studying in Portugal, because, as I said, there was this bet in research and education in general, but especially higher education, where we were clearly lacking some years ago. And the results are also showing, because, for example, when I was Director General 10-15 years ago, I was used to learn about Portuguese who wanted to study, for example, in the United States. That's what is most interesting for us now. And these Portuguese that wanted to study in the US, they wanted to study in undergraduate studies, graduation, doctorates, PhD, in different levels. Nowadays, they don't look, or they almost don't look to come abroad to study for an undergraduate course. They normally come only for masters and especially for PhDs, which means that the level of the Portuguese universities also grew clearly, and they don't feel the need to come abroad. On the other hand, it's also nice to see that if you compare with some years ago, you have more American students ready and willing to study in Portugal, at least part of, for a semester, for example, or a year, as part of their studies here in the US. Not only the ones that are especially interested because of their majors in Portuguese language or in Portuguese culture, but the ones that are, for example, interested in areas related with the sectors where we have been growing more, like some engineering and, for example, renewable energy. Renewable energy is really an area where we see more interest from foreigners to study in Portugal and to learn how we are dealing and how our universities and our researchers are dealing with these sectors.
Thank you so much. I think that once again, we thank the Ambassador of Portugal to the United States for
a long journey.
So we have a gift for you, which is produced by our students here at Fresno State. We are the region in the world that produces 25% of the food on the US tables. So within 100 miles of Fresno, 25% of the food that is grown in America, consumed in America, is produced here. So from our students to you, we welcome you to Fresno.
Again, thank you so much to the ambassador. Thanks to the president for hosting this event. I wanted to just acknowledge a couple of real quick. Congressman Jim Costa was actually going to deliver the closing remarks, but unfortunately he cannot be here because of health reasons. He'll be okay. Just until a few minutes ago, but they had another commitment. His chief of staff, Juan Lopes, was here, and Kathy also from his staff. And I want to thank him. And also Congressman Valadão, Congressman David Valadão could not be here, but he's represented by his parents, Eduardo and Fatima Valadão. Can we give him a big hand, please? California, we have 5 Congress people of Portuguese background in the United States Congress. So 4 men and 1 lady. The one lady is Lorraine Trahan from Massachusetts, and the other 4 are from California, and the other 4 are from 3 from the Valley, 1 kind of out of the Valley into the Bay Area. So that's, of course, as you know, Congressman Jim Costa, Congressman David Valadão, Congressman-elect just now, recently from the northern part of the Valley, John Duarte, and from the way north into the Pleasanton area that the ambassador kind of discovered, or kind of not actually did in his staff, is Congressman Eric Swalwell, which is not a very Portuguese name. But Congressman Eric Swalwell is of Portuguese background from his maternal side. His great-grandparents were immigrants from Madeira Islands, and we have pinpointed that to the California Portuguese American Coalition, from the Madeira Islands and the Azores Islands, from the island of São Miguel to Hawaii, and then from Hawaii to Ohio, which is a long ways, and then from Ohio to California. So it is indeed a small world. Eric Swalwell, this happened because he had a picture on Instagram right before the World Cup, and his brother was wearing a Portuguese jersey. And, and then I guess all kinds of people on social media said, "What is this? You're a congressman and your brother's from Portugal?" And he says, "No, I'm actually 25% Portuguese." We have a connection. And so we have 4 Portuguese congressmen from California, 3 of them from the Central Valley, and 1 of them kind of north to Northern California. So, and 144 Portuguese American elected officials in California, 2 of them here in the state, here on the Board of Supervisors, who unfortunately could not be here today, Buddy Mendes and Brian Pacheco. So, once again, thank you all for joining us. Thanks to the students for attending. Yes, of course. And again, thanks to the deans who are here from all of the different colleges that support PBBI. We appreciate it very, very much. We're very excited about the 20th of March. If you are here, come to this same room with President Jimenez Sandoval. Thanks to the efforts of all of the different components here at the university, but Dean Scott Moore. And we will have a signing ceremony with SIPMA, and hopefully we'll increase those numbers of students from Fresno State having an opportunity to study in Portugal and vice versa.
Just towards one regarding precisely the study of Portuguese, the numbers, I forgot to mention, the numbers have been increasing, and it's very pleasing to me to know or to see that people interested in learning Portuguese, as I said, are not only descendants of Portuguese,
but also people that have nothing to do with Portugal. But my main note, and that's why I asked for this second time with the floor, it's just to wish Representative Congressman Jim Costa all the best in the quick recovery. I did it by phone already, but just to say also here, and also to thank, muito obrigado, the presence of the parents of Congressman Valadão. He also told me personally that you would be here. He couldn't be here, but you would be here, so thank you, muito obrigado. It's, I mean, for an ambassador of Portugal, it's really a big pleasure. And of course, I have nothing to do with party politics. I'm myself a civil servant, and I've been working with different political parties in Portugal. But independently of the political parties they represent, it's always a pleasure to see Portuguese American or descendants of Portuguese being elected in general. Of course, especially to the Congress, to the Federal Congress, but in general being elected to other different functions. Thank you again.
Again, thank you all. We'd like to take a picture of the Socializing Ambassador. We have about 15 minutes here. Thank you.